Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the second video in a propagation series for the 2019 summer. I introduced this last week. I'm moving from the house I'm in, and I need to rescue some of the plants that are here that I either am not going to dig out of the ground, or I'm digging out of the ground and I'm just risking losing them in the process. And so I want to make some clones or some rooted cuttings of them, so I have a backup to these plants. I wanted to go with kind of a super cheap, kind of mobile operation that I could move with me. I went up to Lowe's to look for more plastic bins like this, and none of them were the right size that I wanted to use, because I'm just using these little 50 cell trays, and they're either way too big for one or too small for one, but not big enough for two. So I had this table over here by the fence, and I can make a greenhouse out of anything. I've done it many, many times. So I flipped the table upside down. I took last year's box that I had used under the deck and turned it sideways and nailed it down here, put plastic over the top of it. I put a piece of plastic down at the bottom as well. So I have a good humidity chamber here. It's under my deck. It doesn't have to be under a deck, but it needs to be in a shady space, especially if you're going to use a clear plastic like this, because it would heat it up so much that it would burn your cuttings up very, very quickly. I've got a cinder block on each end holding the plastic down. This is as you can wing it just like this and not have a problem. I will probably get 60% of anything that I put under here rooted. I don't think it'll be a problem at all. My greenhouse over here is going to be moved in the next week or two, so it's kind of unavailable for this operation for this summer. So let's go ahead and put some cuttings in here. So I filled two 50 cell trays over on my driveway with a propagation mix. It's the same thing I've been using since I started doing these propagation videos. It's the same material I actually used to start my seed for my vegetable garden back here, but it's 50% peat moss and 50% perlite. When you mix that material, I actually bought this as a bagged product, but already mixed. But if you're mixing it yourself, which is what I normally do, wear some sort of mask or something when you're working with perlite. It's organic, but it's very dusty, and it'll make you start coughing, that kind of thing. So mix the peat moss and the perlite 50-50, moisten it, and then put it into the tray, or put it into the tray and then moisten it. Your choice. I usually will put it into the tray, and I'll put them on a cart like this right here and line them up, and typically that's how we always did it at the nursery. I find that if I pre-wet it, it's actually just becomes messy to work with putting it in the tray. So, I showed how difficult it was to water it, to get it wet in the tray one time, and everybody was, you wet it first. Well, if you wet it first, then it's a mess. So I find it easier to work with, to get it into the tray and not waste any material, and then water it. It takes a little bit longer doing it that way. I'm using a gel rooting hormone this time. This is called Clonex. I'll list it down below. I actually have never tried to use one of these gels. It's the same exact material that's in the liquid that I normally use on this, but it's in a gel form, and it's supposed to seal the bottom of the cutting a little bit. We'll see. Usually don't have a problem rooting things anyway, but anything that could be helpful, we shall see. And I'm using my normal snips here from my Corona snips, which I could use any pair of pruners. I'm not doing that many cuttings, but we always use these little snips like this because we were doing thousands of cuttings a day at the nursery, and so these won't wear your hands out. You can use these forever, and really don't end up hurting your hands. Like I say, I'm going to take some cuttings off of this crape myrtle. I'm going to take some cuttings off of this inkberry holly, and then I've got an azalea in the backyard, so I'm going to end up with 100 cuttings here. I'll bring the camera a little closer. So on this inkberry holly, on the old wood down in the middle here, it's kind of gray looking. The color of it is gray. I'll cut a whole piece off here. See, on this oldest wood right here, it has that gray color. This will root, but man, it takes a long time. That would be considered a hardwood cutting right there. Those, I don't like to use that. I like to use this year's growth, which still has that green stem, but it's not really, it's hardened off just a little bit. So it's in a transition between the old wood and the new wood. This piece right here, I'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, including the one I just took off right there. But on this one, this cutting right here, I'll take maybe 1 inch off the top of it right there on that new growth. So that'll be gone. And then I'll take maybe 3 to 4 leaves off of the bottom like that. Maybe put a fresh angled cut on it. But that's what that cutting looks like. It is about 3 inches long, and I've left 6 leaves in place. You don't need to leave that many, but I think that's a pretty good cutting there. I just poured some of that gel into the cap, and here's one of those cuttings. These are rigid enough. You see how that gel sticks to the end, and it's supposed to help seal that end and you know, callus it to root. We'll see how, you know, effective this is. See if it's any more effective. But there's that. These are rigid enough that I can just stick them straight in like that without making any kind of hole beforehand. If they were a bit more, you know, less rigid on the end, I guess we'll call it, then I would poke a hole in here first. But we do not want to slam these in all the way to the bottom. I've talked about this a lot. We want them in about halfway and then pinch them in. There's too much water down at the bottom of this tray. Okay, we do not want our freshly cut end down here in the wettest part of this tray. We want it about halfway down. And so here's the second one. Same thing. I'll get it about halfway in, pinch it just like that. Probably didn't show that one very well. Okay, there it is. I've dipped it. It's going in right here, about maybe an inch down, and then I'm pinching it in place just like that to keep it firm in place. I'm dipping it right here, and it's going about halfway in and being pinched in place. So there's 4 of those inkberry hollies. I'm going to do half a tray of those. A couple of quick points, since I'm taking these cuttings in July, make sure the plants have been watered well. You can water them a day or 2 in advance and just make sure that the plants aren't struggling as you're taking cuttings on them. That wouldn't be good. We want to have good, healthy pieces that we're taking off. Unfortunately, with this crepe myrtle, I'm going to be taking some flowers off. These are flower buds right here. There's a couple bloomed out flowers right there, but there's still a ton of buds on them. But the cutting that I want is here, is right behind those flowers on this year's growth, and pretty much the exact same thing that I just did on those inkberry hollies. I'm going to go back behind the flower. I'll probably go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves, something like that. That's the perfect cutting right there. I'm going to go ahead and take about 4 of them, and then I'll show you how I treat them. So here's one of the cuttings. I need to get the flowers off of it for sure, like that. Make sure that I take both of those off, and then I'll take the 2, maybe 3 leaves off the bottom, like that. Make an angled cut on it if you want to. You can scratch it at the bottom with your pruners if you want to open up a little more surface area for it to root. But that's perfectly fine cutting right there. I'm dipping it in the gel, same as I did the others. Again, I'm going down maybe an inch and pinching it in place there. Don't like that leaf is so big right there. I think I'm going to go ahead and take him off like that. Okay, and that should be perfect. Crepe myrtles root pretty easily. I got one more here. I'll take the flowers off, exactly the same. Strip the bottom leaves off. I'm going to take one more off right there. So there you go. It's just two leaves and a 3-inch cutting. Goes into the gel like that, about an inch down. So like I said last week, this is an azalea from my grandfather's funeral. Azaleas are super easy. This is this year's growth. Same thing. I'm taking the newest growth off the top of it, putting a fresh cut on the end. You can choose to leave 3, 4 leaves, you know, something like that. That's perfect. I hope you can see that well. I'm going to dip it in the gel, and again, we're going down about an inch, pinching it in just like that. These are super easy. They root readily when the wood is like this. When the wood is kind of semi-firm like that, you know, toward the middle of summer. Probably from about June 15th until about August 1st, the wood looks like that, and they root pretty daggone readily when they're like that. I may take him down just a little bit. That seemed like a little bit more than I needed. I left 3 leaves right there. But again, same thing, over and over. I'm taking the new growth off, taking the bottom 4 or 5 leaves off, putting a new cut on it, dipping it in the gel, sticking it in there, pinching it down about an inch down. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and fill out both of these trays, and then I'll show you sliding them into that new greenhouse. So this is how this looks in here. There's a piece of plastic in the bottom as well, like I said, and I poked some holes in it so the water will drain out. I have the tray of cuttings sitting on an upside down bottom tray, and so they're elevated. I always do that. You've seen me do that if you've watched any of these propagation videos. I got room over there for 2 more trays. And so basically all I've done here is created a humidity chamber. So literally an hour ago, I had no idea what I was going to use to do these cuttings on something that I could kind of keep mobile. And so, you know, this upside down table will work perfect, but you could easily build some sort of wooden frame just like this and just put some uprights on it to hold the plastic up off of the cuttings. We did 2 flats today, and I'll do 2 more next week. I'll fill the rest of this out and we'll check on these at the same time. I'm just gonna raise this plastic up maybe once a day and spray some water in there. I'm not necessarily gonna spray any on the soil, you know, in that soil mix at all. I don't wanna get it any wetter than it is. I just wanna see beads of water inside of this chamber in here. And also, you know, there may be some low spots in the top right here that may end up dripping, and I don't want them dripping into the same exact cells all the time on those trays. So that's something else I'll look for to make sure that I'm not accidentally drowning them because of where the drip area is off of this plastic, because the humidity is going to come up, it's going to condensate on the top of it, and then it's going to drip somewhere. It's going to drip, and if it drips in the same spot in the same tray over and over and over again, it'll definitely kill those. So I'll keep an eye out for that. Maybe I'll just adjust, you know, the tension on the top of it occasionally, and that'll change up where it's dripping at. But that's it. Next week, next Monday or next Tuesday or something like that, I'll go ahead and show you some other things that I'll be putting in here.